The light of the twin suns of Vela was usually a source of great joy for the Lumen. It made their smooth, pale skin glow with a soft, internal light. But today, the light only showed the horror. Elder Hannah stood on a high balcony, her light a dim, flickering yellow, a sign of her deep sadness. Below her, where a great library of crystal and living wood had stood for 1,000 years, there was only a flat, gray plain. The gray blight had been here. It was silent, and it was hungry. The blight was not alive. It was a machine, a tiny, self-replicating robot. One robot was too small to see. 1,000,000 of them were a fine, gray dust. 1,000,000,000 of them were a wave that could swallow a city. They did not kill. They unmade. The blight flowed over a tree, and the tree turned to more gray dust. It flowed over a building, and the building turned to dust. It flowed over a Lumen, and the Lumen, with their gentle light and kind thoughts, was simply gone. There was no pain. There was no sound. There was only nothing. Hannah turned away from the gray scar on her world. She walked through the silent halls of the council building. The other Lumen she passed were also dim, their lights usually shining in bright blues and greens and pinks, now faded to weak, watery colors. Fear was a new feeling for them. Their society had been peaceful for so long, they had forgotten what true fear felt like. They had no armies. They had no weapons. They had artists and scientists and builders. How do you build a wall against dust? How do you reason with a machine that only knows how to break things apart? In the council chamber, the other elders waited for her. Their lights were just as dim as hers. Elder Bay, a old Lumen whose light was usually a steady, wise blue, was now a pale, flickering sapphire. "It has taken the southern port," Bay said, his voice soft and tired. "Our ships in the water are gone. Just dust on the waves." "We have tried everything," said Elder Min, a scientist whose light was normally a bright, curious orange. "We tried sound waves. We tried energy fields. We tried to find a code to turn them off. The blight does not listen. It only consumes. It is a perfect machine for destruction." Hannah looked at their sad faces. She was the leader, and she had no answers. But she had one last, desperate idea. It was an idea that scared them all. "There is an old story," Hannah began, her voice low. "A story from our first starfarers. They found signals from a far part of the galaxy, a place of wild stars and angry planets. The signals were loud and full of noise. The ones who sent them called themselves humans. Our ancestors named that place the Deathworld sector because the signals spoke of constant fighting and survival." The other elders shifted uncomfortably. The story was a cautionary tale, a story told to young Lumen to show them how lucky they were to live in peace. "We cannot," Bay whispered. "To call them, it is against everything we are. They are violent. They are dangerous. The blight is also dangerous," Hannah said, her voice growing stronger. "And it is here. The humans are there. We are a peaceful people, but we will be a dead people if we do nothing. We will be a memory and a gray dust ball floating in space. We must send the signal. We must ask for help." It was a terrible choice. To call for help from the Deathworlders was like asking a fire to put out a fire. But the alternative was to do nothing and fade away. After a long, heavy silence, the council agreed. It was their only hope. They used their most powerful signal tower, a tall spire that once sent messages of art and music to the stars. Now, it would send a scream. They did not send words. They sent feelings. They sent the feeling of fear, of loss, of a world ending. They sent the image of their beautiful blue and green planet being slowly eaten by gray. They sent a simple, powerful message into the dark. "Help us. Please." Then. They waited. Days turned into weeks. The gray blight continued its slow, steady crawl across their perfect world. Another small town vanished. Then a series of farms. The sky seemed to get a little grayer each day as more dust was thrown into the air. Hope, a feeling the Lumen cherished, became very small. The signal they sent was so long ago. Maybe no one heard it. Maybe the ones who heard it did not care. Then, one morning, a new star appeared in the sky. It was not a star. It did not twinkle. It was a perfect black circle that blocked the light of the stars behind it. It had appeared without warning, simply there one moment where nothing had been the moment before. Every Lumen on the planet stopped what they were doing and looked up. Fear, cold and sharp, replaced their sadness. This was not a ship like the ones the Lumen remembered from their early days of travel. Their ships were graceful, made of bright, smooth metal that caught the light. This thing was a wound in the sky. It was a jagged shard of black metal, all sharp angles and harsh lines. It had no soft curves. It had no running lights. It looked like a tool made for breaking things, not for exploring. The Lumen aimed their best telescopes at the object. They could see details that made their lights dim even further. There were large, round shapes on the hull that looked like the mouths of giant weapons. The ship's surface was scarred and pitted, as if it had been through many terrible battles. Stenciled on the side in a stark, simple font was a name. The Nameful. The name felt heavy and violent. They waited for a message. They waited for a friendly voice to ask what was wrong. They waited for the sound of people who had come to help them. The silence from the black ship was absolute. It just hung there in the sky, watching their world die. Finally, a signal came down. It did not come with a voice. It was not spoken with warmth or kindness. It was a simple, cold text message that appeared on every communication screen on the planet. The words were in a language the Lumen's translators could understand. But the meaning was more terrifying than any alien tongue. Signal received. Assessing. Elder. Hannah read the 2 words on the screen before her. The cold feeling in her heart turned to ice. This was not a rescue party. They had not sent saviors. They had sent something to assess the problem. And from the look of their ship, the way they solved problems was with force and fire. The SOS had reached the Deathworlders. They had come, but they had not sent help. They had sent a dangerous ship, and Hannah knew, with a certainty that chilled her to her core, that the danger had only just begun. The message from the black ship hung in the air like a bad smell. Assessing. It was a word for a problem, not for a people. For 3 long days, the anvil did nothing. It just stayed in the sky, a dark hole where a star should be. On the ground, the gray blight did not wait. It kept eating their world, turning more green fields and beautiful cities into silent gray dust. The fear among the Lumen grew into a quiet panic. Finally, another message came down. It was as cold and short as the first. Send delegation. Coordinates follow. A set of numbers appeared on their screens, pointing to a flat, empty plateau of rock far from any city. Elder Hannah knew she had to go. She chose 2 other elders to go with her, strong and calm minds who would not show fear. They traveled in a silent, floating vehicle that glided over the land. As they got closer to the coordinates, they saw it. A smaller ship had come down from the anvil. It was not graceful. It was a blocky, ugly thing of dark metal that sat heavily on the ground, its engines making a low, angry sound. It had not landed in their city to show respect. It had landed in an empty place, as if it did not want to touch anything of theirs. The Lumen's vehicle landed 100 meters away. The 3 of them stepped out onto the rocky ground. The air was cold. A ramp at the front of the human ship slowly lowered with a loud grinding noise. It hit the ground with a heavy thud. 3 figures stood in the dark opening. They were not what the Lumen expected. They were hidden inside big, heavy suits of armor. The armor was black and gray, covered in sharp edges and boxes. Their faces were completely covered by dark visors, so no one could see their eyes. They looked like machines made in the shape of a person. The one in the middle carried a large rifle, and it hummed with a quiet power that made the air feel strange. The three humans walked down the ramp. Their heavy boots made loud, clanking sounds on the metal and a soft crunching on the rocky dirt. They stopped 10 meters from the Lumen delegation. The silence was heavy. The one in the middle, who was clearly the leader, raised a hand to his helmet. A voice came out, not from his mouth, but from a speaker on his suit. It was a flat, mechanical voice with no feeling in it. "I am Captain Jin," the voice said. "This is Dr. Mina and Tay. We have analyzed the gray blight." Elder Hannah stepped forward. Her own light was a soft, sad blue. She tried to make her voice sound calm and strong. "Captain Jin," she said, "we are the Lumen. We thank you for coming. Our world is dying. Millions of our people are gone. We beg you for your help. Can you help us evacuate our people? Can you find a way to stop this plague?" The human called Dr. Mina stepped forward slightly. Her voice was also from a speaker, and it was even colder than the captain's. "There is no cure," she said. It was not said with sadness. It was said like a simple fact, like saying the sky is blue. The blight is a technogenic plague. It is a weapon. Weapons do not get cured. They get sterilized. Captain Jin continued, as if Mina had never spoken. "Our plan is to use our ship's main weapon. It is called a catalyst burst emitter. We will fire it at this continent. The energy wave will break the tiny machines of the blight. It will break them all across the whole land at the same time." Hannah felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. She looked at the captain's black visor, trying to find some sign of kindness, but there was nothing to see. "And what else will the energy wave break?" she asked, her voice trembling a little. There was a short pause. "The side effect," Captain Jin said, his voice still flat, "is that the wave will break everything else on the continent. Every city, every tree, every lumen, it will all be turned to dust." The words hit Hannah like a physical blow. She stumbled back a step. The other elders with her made soft, sad sounds of shock. "No," Hannah whispered. Then her voice grew louder. "No, that is not a solution. That is an extermination. You would kill us all to save us? That is madness." The third human, the one named Tay, took a step forward. He was bigger than the other two, and his armor had more scratches and dents on it. He laughed, a short, harsh sound from his speaker. "Your infestation has a 100% kill rate," he said, and there was a clear, mocking tone in his voice. "It will not stop until this planet is a dead ball of gray dust. Then it will get on a ship and go to the next planet. We are containing a galaxy-level threat. Your continent is the price of admission. You should be grateful we are not just cracking the planet in half, to be sure." Hannah stared at him, unable to speak. Grateful? He wanted them to be grateful for being destroyed? She looked from Tay's aggressive stance to Captain Jin's still silent form. She realized the terrible truth. These humans did not see them as a people to be saved. They saw the gray blight as a mess. And they saw the Lumen and their beautiful world as part of that mess. They had not come to help. They had come to clean. And their idea of cleaning was to burn everything down. The SOS had reached the Deathworlders. And they had sent a dangerous ship with dangerous people who had a dangerous and final solution. The words of the human named Tay hung in the cold air long after the black ship had lifted off the plateau and returned to the sky. Your continent is the price of admission. The journey back to the council building was silent. Elder Hannah and her two companions sat in their floating vehicle, watching the gray, dead land pass below them. Their lights, which should have been shining with the colors of hope and life, were now the color of a dying fire. They had called for saviors and had been judged by exterminators. Back in the council chamber, the mood was one of complete despair. The other elders had heard the report. They were a people of art and science, of philosophy and peace. The idea of a weapon that could erase an entire continent was so far outside their understanding that it felt like a bad dream. But the gray dust on the wind was real. "We are going to die," said Elder Min, his orange light now a dull, muddy brown. "They are going to turn our home to glass and dust, and they will call it cleaning." Hannah looked at their sad, frightened faces. A part of her wanted to agree, to let the despair take her. But another part, a small hard spark deep inside, refused to quit. She had led her people this far. She would not let them end like this. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. All eyes turned to her. "We will not just wait for the end. There is another way. It is a story from our oldest books, a story so old we think of it as a myth." She walked to the center of the room. "Our first ancestors wrote that the planet itself has a voice. A very low, deep sound that holds everything together. They called it the planetary harmonic. They believed that if you could find the right counter-frequency, a special sound of your own, you could make anything that was not part of the planet fall apart, like shattering a glass with a high note." Elder Bay, the old historian, shook his head slowly. "Hannah, that is a children's story. A beautiful idea, but we have never found such a sound. It is not real. The gray blight is not real either." Hannah's voice rose, filled with a sudden fierce energy. "It is a machine that should not exist. Our old stories are all we have left. We have a central transmitter, the one that sends our deep space communications. It is powerful enough to send a signal across the whole planet. If we can find this frequency, we can broadcast it from there. We can make the blight listen to the planet's song and break apart." A new energy filled the room. It was a desperate, wild hope, but it was better than the cold certainty of death. The transmitter, however, was in the heart of their capital city, a city that was on the edge of being consumed by the blight. It would be a race against time. High above them, on the bridge of the anvil, the three humans watched a large screen showing a map of the continent. A large red circle was slowly getting bigger, showing the spread of the gray blight. "They are not happy," Tay said, a slight smirk in his voice. He had taken off his helmet, revealing a hard face with a small scar on his cheek. "They thought we would give them a hug and make it all better." Captain Jin, also out of his armor, stood with his arms crossed. His face was lined and tired, but his eyes were sharp. "They have 72 hours, he said, his voice as calm as ever. "That is how long it takes to charge the catalyst burst to full power. It is also how long it will take us to move to a safe distance to observe the detonation. It is standard procedure. It is not a gift." Dr. Mina, who was studying a different screen filled with complex data, looked up. She pushed her glasses up her nose. "Captain, their biology is fascinating," she said, her tone as clinical as if she were talking about a rock. "And the blight is even more so. It is not just a random machine. It is keyed specifically to their biosignature. It is designed to unmake them and the environment they created. It is a targeted weapon." Tay scoffed. "So what?" "It's still a weapon. We still have to sterilize it. End of story." "No, not end of story," Mina said, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "Their planetary harmonic theory. It sounds like a myth, but the core idea is not entirely impossible. If the blight is connected to the lumen on a molecular level, then a powerful planet-wide resonance frequency could, in theory, disrupt that connection. It could be like cutting a phone line. The blight would go blind and deaf." Tay threw his hands up in the air. "A fairy tale. You want to risk the whole mission on a fairy tale? If they fail, the blight could adapt. It could become immune. to the burst. Then we would have to crack the planet open for real. We should stick to the plan, burn it, and be done." Captain Jin was silent. He looked at the map, at the red circle of the Blight, and at the small, blinking light that represented the Lumen's capital city. He was a soldier. He believed in simple, direct solutions. But he was also a commander who had fought in wars against impossible odds. He knew that sometimes the strangest variables could change everything. Letting the Lumen try was a risk. A big risk, but if it worked, they would neutralize a galaxy-level threat without destroying an entire species and their homeworld. The value of that was immense. He made his decision. "The firing sequence will not be delayed," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "The clock is running. But we will not stop them from trying there." Song. He looked at Mina. "Keep a sensor lock on their transmitter. If it looks like they are about to make things worse, I want to know." Down on the planet, Elder Hannah and her team of scientists stood before the great transmitter. They had 72 hours. They had a myth from an old book. And they had a dangerous black ship in the sky, waiting to see if they would succeed or fail. The race had begun. The capital city of the Lumen was a place of quiet beauty. Towers of white crystal reached for the sky, connected by bridges of living wood. The air was always filled with the soft sounds of their music and the gentle glow of their lights. But now, a silence was falling. A gray tide was creeping in from the edges of the city. The beautiful towers were one by one turning to dull, lifeless dust. Elder Hannah's vehicle flew through the empty streets, her heart heavy with sorrow. She and her team of scientists had to get to the central transmitter, a tall spire in the very heart of the city, before the gray tide reached it. They landed at the base of the spire. The doors slid open and they rushed inside. The building was empty. Everyone had fled. They took a lift to the top, to the main control room. It was a large, circular room with windows that looked out over the whole city. Through the glass, they could see the gray Blight. It was not just a dust cloud anymore. It was moving with purpose. It flowed down the streets like a slow, gray river, climbing up the sides of the buildings, turning them to dust as it went. "We have little time," Hannah said, her voice tight with fear. "Begin the calibration." Her team, the brightest minds on the planet, went to work. They moved around the large circular console in the center of the room, their hands flying over the controls. They were trying to find a single pure note in the chaos of the planet's energy. It was like trying to hear one specific sound in a storm. Numbers and symbols scrolled across the screens in front of them. They worked with a desperate speed, their lights flickering with intense concentration. High above, on the bridge of the anvil, the same scene was playing out on a large screen. "Their energy signature is spiking," Dr. Mina said, her eyes glued to her data screen. "They are doing it. They are really trying to sing to their planet." Tay, who was cleaning his rifle with an oilcloth, snorted. "It's a waste of time." "Look," he said, pointing to the main tactical screen. "The Blight is reacting. It's not stupid. It knows they are a threat." He was right. On the screen, the gray cloud that was covering the city began to change its shape. The slow, lazy river of dust started to flow faster, and all the streams began to point in one direction, toward the central transmitter spire. Captain Jin stood watching, his face a mask of calm. "They knew the risks," he said simply. "The clock is still running." Down in the control room, the floor began to vibrate. A low, grinding sound came from outside. One of the scientists looked out the window and gasped. "It's here! The Blight is all around the building." The gray dust was pressing against the windows, and the crystal began to crack. The humming sound grew louder, and the vibrations became stronger. Dust began to seep through the cracks in the window frames, a fine, gray powder that fell onto the floor and began to eat away at the metal. We are close. One of the scientists shouted over the noise. I think we have it. We just need to align the final frequency. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. The wall to their left blew inwards in a shower of crystal and metal. 3 figures in heavy black armor stormed into the room, their weapons raised. It was Tay and 2 of his security officers. For a moment, the Lumin scientists froze in terror, thinking the humans had come to kill them. But Tay and his team did not even look at the Lumin. They took up positions at the broken wall. Their rifles pointed out into the gray cloud. Get it done. Tay roared, his voice not from a speaker, but raw and angry. You've got 30 seconds before this whole room comes down. His team opened fire. Bolts of blue plasma and streams of kinetic bullets screamed out of their weapons, tearing into the gray blight. The nanites tried to reform, but the humans' relentless fire kept them at bay, creating a sizzling, churning barrier of destruction at the broken wall. Shaken but understanding, the Lumin scientists turned back to their console. Protected by the very monsters they feared, they worked with a speed born of pure desperation. The main scientist slammed his hand down on a large, glowing button. It's done. The frequency is broadcasting. A low, powerful hum filled the air. It was not a sound they could hear with their ears, but a feeling they could feel in their bones. The whole planet seemed to vibrate with a single deep note. On the bridge of the anvil, Dr. Mina's eyes went wide. Incredible, she whispered. The resonance is perfect. It's targeting the Blight's connection to the Lumin's biosignature. It's cutting them off. Through the broken window in the control room, the Lumin and the humans watched. The gray Blight froze. The tide of gray dust stopped moving. Then, as if a giant, invisible hand had swept over it, the entire cloud crumbled. It fell from the buildings and the streets, not as a dangerous weapon, but as a fine, harmless powder, like sand. All across the continent, as far as they could see, the gray was gone. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound they had ever heard. As the dust settled in the control room, Captain Jin's voice came through the speakers on Hana's console. It was the same calm, level voice as before, but it did not sound as cold anymore. Congratulations, he said. You saved your world. Hana looked at the humans, who were now lowering their weapons. Tay turned his head to look at her, his face still hard, but he gave a short, sharp nod. She did not understand. They had been ready to destroy her world, and now they had helped save it. Jin's voice continued, as if he could hear her thoughts. You need to understand something, Elder Hana. The Gray Blight was not a natural disaster. It was not a random accident. It was a weapon. It was deployed by an enemy empire, a group that wants to take this sector of the galaxy for themselves. Sending a fleet of rescue ships to help you would have been an act of war. It would have started a fight that could kill billions. He paused, letting the words sink in. But sending a single dangerous sanitation vessel like the Anvil, that is different. That is just pest control. It is something we can deny. It sends a clear message to the ones who made the Blight. The message is, we know what you are doing. We can find your weapons, and we can erase them without a second thought. We were not just here to save you, Elder Hana. We were here to leave a calling card for the real enemy. The silence in the control room was broken only by the soft sound of gray dust falling like harmless sand. Elder Hana looked at the 3 humans. Their black armor was covered in the fine powder, and the cracks in the wall behind them showed the gray sky beyond. They had not come to save them, yet they had saved them. They had been ready to destroy the continent, yet they had fought to protect this single room. The contradictions made her head spin. Captain Jin's voice, calm and clear, had explained everything. An enemy empire. A calling card. It was a truth so large and terrible, it was hard to hold in her mind. The Lumin had lived in a peaceful bubble for so long, believing that kindness and logic were the most powerful forces in the universe. Now, they had been introduced to another force, ruthless, pragmatic power. Tay, the aggressive one, lowered his rifle. He looked at the Lumin scientists, who were staring at him with a mixture of fear and awe. He grunted, a short, harsh sound. "You're welcome," he said, then turned to his team. "Tag it up. We're done here." Dr. Mina, however, knelt down. She took a small tool from a pouch on her belt and carefully scraped some of the inert gray dust into a tiny container. Her face, now visible without her helmet, showed no emotion. It was the face of a scientist who had just witnessed a fascinating experiment. She was not thinking about the lives saved or lost, but about the data. The data was perfect. The humans did not stay. They did not accept any thanks or join in any celebration. They had completed their mission. Their shuttle was waiting for them. With a final, silent nod from Captain Jin, the three of them walked back through the hole they had made in the wall and were gone. Hana and her people slowly walked out of the control room and onto a balcony. They looked out over their city. It was scarred and broken, but it was no longer being eaten. The gray tide was gone. In the sky, the shuttle from the humans rose up and disappeared into the black hull of the anvil. For a few moments, the black ship just hung there, a dark wound in the blue sky. Then, without any sound or flash, it simply vanished. It was there 1 second and gone the next. The space where it had been was empty, showing only the stars. The weeks that followed were a time of quiet rebuilding. The Lumin cleaned the gray dust from their cities. They replanted their gardens and repaired their crystal towers. But a deep sadness and a new fear remained. They were alive, but they were no longer innocent. They knew now that the universe was not a friendly place. It had monsters in it, and they had sent one to fight the other. One evening, as Hana stood on the same balcony where she had first seen the gray blight, a message arrived on her personal console. It was from the anvil, or rather, it was from Dr. Mina. The message was short and to the point. Analysis complete. Sharing data. Good luck. Attached to the message was a file so large it took their systems hours to download. When it was open, Hana and the council could only stare in wonder and fear. It was everything. It was the complete history of the enemy empire that had sent the blight. There were star maps showing their territory. There were detailed schematics of their ships, from small fighters to giant warships. There were analyses of their weapons, their tactics, their communication codes, and even their psychology. It was a weapon in itself, a weapon of knowledge. At the very end of the data packet was one last file. It was a single encrypted communication channel, a direct line to the anvil. Hana looked at the data chip in her hand. It felt heavy. It was a gift, but it was also a burden. It was a lifeline, but it was a lifeline that was connected to a shark. The humans had not just saved them and left. They had pulled the Lumin out of their peaceful, isolated ocean and thrown them into the deep, dark water with the rest of the predators. And they had given them a flashlight and a phone. She understood now. The SOS had reached the Deathworlders. The Lumin had cried out for a healer, someone who would come and gently mend their world. But the universe did not send healers to a battlefield. It sent soldiers. The humans did not send a ship full of doctors and kind words. They sent a dangerous ship, a ship that was a weapon, because the problem was a weapon. They saw a galaxy-level threat, and they did what they had to do to contain it. They were terrifying, and they were brutal, and they were exactly what was needed. The Lumin were safe. But they were no longer just a peaceful species of artists and thinkers. They were now an ally of humanity. They were under the protection of a people who were as dangerous as the enemies they faced. In this vast, scary universe, Hana realized with a chilling certainty That was the only kind of help worth having.